But what we saw is folks who were reporting on the left end of the spectrum mainly followed folks on the left, and folks on the right followed everyone.
Right.
What you were talking about earlier, that there's these bubbles.
There's bubbles, and we've helped create them and maintain them.
So here's what ends up happening, and this is one of the big problems that people have with this story particularly. You have a left-wing activist who works for NBC News. I'm not accusing you of having read the article. He spends like a day lobbying to Twitter saying, guys, you have to do this, you have to make these changes. The next day he writes a story saying that 4chan is organizing these harassment campaigns and death threats. And while 4chan was doing threads about it, you can't accuse 4chan simply for talking about it because Reddit was talking about it too, as was Twitter. So then the next day, after he published his article, now he's getting threats. And then Twitter issues a statement saying, we will take action. And to make matters worse, when John Levine, a writer for The Wrap, got a statement from one of your spokespeople saying, yes, we are banning people for saying learn to code, a bunch of journalists came out and then lied. I had no idea why, saying this is not true, this is fake news. Then a second statement was published by Twitter saying it's part of a harassment campaign. And so then the mainstream narrative becomes, oh, they're only banning people who are part of a harassment campaign. But you literally see legitimate, high-profile individuals getting suspensions for joining in on a joke.
Oh, there for sure probably mistakes in there. I don't think that any of us are claiming that we got this 100% right.
And probably our team having a lack of context into actually what's happening as well. And we would fully admit we probably were way too aggressive when we first saw this as well and made mistakes.
I hope this clarifies then. You have situations like this where you can see, this journalist, I'm not going to name him, but he routinely has very left-wing, I don't want to use overtly esoteric words, but intersectional dogmatic points of view, right? So this is considered...
What does that mean?
So intersectional feminism is considered like a small ideology. People refer to these groups as the regressive left or the identitarian left. These are basically people who hold views that a person is judged based on the color of their skin instead of the content of their character. So you have the right-wing version, which is like the alt-right, the left-wing version, which is like intersectional feminism is how it's typically referred to. So you'll see people say things like, typically when they rag on white men or when they say like white feminism, these are signals that they hold these particular views. And these views are becoming more pervasive. So what ends up happening is you have a journalist who clearly holds these views. I don't even want to call him a journalist. He writes extremely biased and out-of-context story. Twitter takes action in response, seemingly in response. Then we can look at what happens with Oliver Dorsey at CNN. He says, the people at CPAC, the conservatives are gullible, eating red meat from grifters, among other things, disparaging comments about the right. And he's the one who's primarily advocating for the removal of certain individuals who you then remove. And then when Kathy Griffin calls for doxing, that's fine. When this guy calls for the death of these kids, he gets a slap on the wrist. And look, I understand the context matters, but grains of sand make a heap. And eventually you have all of these stories piling up. And people are asking you why it only flows in one direction. Because I got to be honest, I'd imagine that calling for the death 3 times of any individual is a bannable offense, even without a warning. You just get rid of them. But it didn't happen, right? We see these, people say men aren't women, though, and they get a suspension. We see people say the editor-in-chief of the Daily Caller may be the best example. #learn to code, quoting The Daily Show, and he gets a suspension. Threatening death and inciting death is a suspension, too. It feels like it's only going in one direction.
Yeah, I think we have a lot of work to do to explain more clearly when we're taking action and why, and certainly looking into any mistakes we may have made in those particular situations.
So would you guys agree that in tech, I think we can all agree this, I would hope you agree,